Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the meditation corner here. I still don't know what to call this and I still don't have an introduction, but we're gonna figure it out. We're flying by the seat of our pants, which is what a good coach does. Today we're gonna talk about the NSCA Strength and Conditioning Specialist exam. I'm gonna give a little overview of what the CSCS is, what the exam is as far as content, tips I have for studying, and a couple other suggestions afterward. First of all, what is the NSCA-CSCS and should you get it? There are a whole lot of certificates to choose from. Which one should you take? The NSCA-CSCS is the standard for strength coaches who want to work in the collegiate or private sector or in professional sport. I chose the NSCA-CSCS specifically because it is world-renowned, like it's recognized around the world, and I work internationally, and I didn't want to have to continue to update which certificates I have by constantly retaking exams depending on where I'm living at the time so that I can practice. The NSCA-CSCS covers me worldwide. The structure of the test. First of all, you have to have a bachelor's degree or be in your senior year about to graduate in order to even take this exam, and you do have to provide proof of that and that you are CPR AED certified. There are two parts to the exam. There's a scientific part and a practical part. They're both written. However, the practical part has videos, which forces you to use your coach's eye, your correcting technique. Some of it is super basic. There was one video I remember where the guy was doing a clean pull and he literally slammed the barbell against the rack, and the question was like, what is wrong with this video? So some of them were that easy. Some of them were a little bit more difficult, but it really is forcing you to use your coach's eye. Scientific session is of course all written. There are no videos in that section. Because there's two sections, you have to pass both of them. They are separate. So if you happen to fail one of them, you only have to retake half of the exam. You don't have to take both parts again, which is great. You need 70% to pass the exam. Again, it's not cumulative. You have to have 70% on practical and 70% on the scientific. As somebody who has taken a lot of standardized tests in my life, especially in grad school, the GRE is the most hellacious experience of my life in academia thus far. This was still a very long test, and decision fatigue is very, very real. So my tips for studying: allow yourself time. You have the opportunity to reschedule your test 1 or 2 times, but it's worth scheduling the exam 3 to 6 months in advance, depending on when you want to take it. Set yourself that deadline and then actually set aside time to study. Here's why. Because tip 2, you gotta read this book. I'm yet to meet somebody who's passed this exam on the first try who hasn't read this book, or at least a significant part of it. Why? Because the questions and answers literally come out of this book. This is the text by the NSCA, The Essentials of Strength and Conditioning. Tip 3, do the Q&A at the end of the chapter. At the end of each chapter, there's a list of vocabulary and then there's a list of question and answer. Do these, write them down. Make sure that you can define all of these terms. Make sure that you can answer these questions sufficiently. And if you're not sure, if you get something wrong, go through, find the answer, and then write out what you didn't understand. Tip 4, again, this is a lot of information. It's important that you understand it as opposed to just memorizing it. But as soon as you can understand how this information all works together, it'll become so much easier to learn because you get how the system works. Summarize it at the end of the chapter and then figure out how it all works together. Tip 5, find practice tests online. I did not personally buy any practice tests. I know they are available for sale. I did not use them. You can find some practice tests online, and there's also an app that you can download that gives you some daily questions. And that's a good way to kind of jog your memory and see where you are. Point 6, use YouTube as a supplement. There are a lot of topics that are very complicated in this book, and there are a lot of videos on YouTube. Especially when you get to biomechanics and bioenergetics, you're gonna wanna take those terms that you don't understand because they are the foundation of strength and conditioning and exercise science, essentially. Plug them into YouTube and watch the videos. And because there is a practical section, it's important that you have a coach's eye developed. So coach, even if that's personal training, even if that's coaching your friend, even if that's coaching your mama, get out there and coach. And it's not enough to just watch other people coaching, you need to coach. It will help you so much how to implement these scientific principles and the practical principles and really sharpen up that coach's eye. Nothing can replace actually taking action and actually coaching. That's maybe one of the most valuable things you can do besides reading the book. Another thing you can do that's just in the run of the day, if you don't already, is follow a program for yourself. That can really help you learn some of the practical aspects. Next tip, don't ignore the sections that you find useless. Don't ignore the sections that you find boring. There's a lot of stuff in this book that is not interesting and that seems irrelevant. However, those questions will be on the exam, especially nutrition, sports and facility management at the end of the book, which I thought, girl, you gotta be kidding me. They were on that exam. Biomechanics and bioenergetics. Those are very specific questions and they want actual numbers. I will never ever forget that mirror needs to be 18 inches from the floor in order to be in regulation with the NSCA guidelines. I'll never forget it because that was on my exam. Last tip, going into the exam, make sure you think, what would the NSCA want me to answer? How would Essentials of Strength and Conditioning answer this question? Because there might be things, especially if you've coached for a long time, especially if you studied sports science, where you learned things slightly differently than this book, but this book again is the guidelines and foundation for the exam. Always have in the back of your head, How would the NSCA answer this question? Last couple of suggestions. Keep in mind the role of fatigue. As I said before, this is a long exam. It's in 2 parts. You get a break in the middle and you don't know which part of the exam is coming first. I got the practical part first and science last, which was really exhausting because I was already really fatigued, having taken 2 hours worth of an exam before I got to the actual science that required memory. So keep in mind that that plays a role, and the more that you practice, if you're taking practice exams, if you're doing longer study sessions, that will help you not be so fatigued when you go into the exam and still be able to recall that information. However, there is a time limit. So if you're somebody who tends to take a lot of time or need to review it 1,000 times, you might need to practice that with some practice exams. And again, keep in mind the details. There were more numbers than I was expecting, and there are more detailed questions that I was expecting. Don't ignore the things that you consider to be boring or useless or out of touch with reality, because yes, they might not be useful on the gym floor, but they're definitely useful for passing this exam. If you've got any more specific questions, drop them below. And also I would encourage you to drop a subscription below so that I know that you're watching and I know what you want to see more of.